happy to see so many of you here because I have to tell you, fear issues, it's an issue that's really, really close to my heart. And I bet a lot of you working in shelters and rescues or having fearful dogs maybe, it's probably close to your hearts as well. I think that very often there's a lot of information out there about aggression issues. My dog's lunging at other dogs, my dog's going after people. But there's not really so much about specifically just fear issues without the aggression component. I know Trish King is going to be speaking tomorrow about aggression issues, and a lot of you will be here for both days. I'm not going to touch so much on the fear-based aggression as the actual fear issues. For those of you who don't know me, my background is actually in working with wolves and wolf hybrids, which are wolf-dog mixes, in addition to working, of course, with dogs. And wolves are some of the most skittish animals you will ever meet. I did not work with them in the wild. I worked with them in a rescue center. And most of these animals were actually people's pets, which, you're going, why would somebody have a wolf as a pet? Well, there's lots of reasons. They think it's cool. They think it's a piece of the wild. And, some of them just really love the animals. And unfortunately, many people got them as small, or at least young animals. And when they grew up, they started acting like what they were. And so they would start doing things like eating through their drywall and so forth. So they would come into the rescue center. And my job at the rescue center as executive director, which actually really meant head pooper scooper, was not only to scoop the poop, but mostly to help with socialization process, because a lot of them came in, and the more wolf content they had in them, unfortunately, the more skittish they would be around people, around noises, around everything. So a large part of what I did there was to help socialize them. We did not adopt them back out. They were not legal. I mean, I'm in California also, and this is in Southern California, where, by the way, it's way warmer. You guys are having a cold snap, aren't you? I got off the plane and Susie picked me up and she was wearing gloves and I thought, no, this is not good. So, but they are really skittish animals, and I actually learned an awful lot by watching them. And I've also done a lot of shelter work in the 90s, for the entire 90s. I worked with the LA city shelters. We have quite a network of shelters down in Southern California, and the city shelters unfortunately can be a little bit rough. Nothing like your lovely and wonderful Marin Humane Society with the behavior programs and all that. It's just more, get them in, get them out, and unfortunately they don't hold them very long. I would highly recommend, if anybody is not working with a shelter who's here, to get into a shelter and volunteer, because that is your best way of getting a crash course in canine body language and behavior. Bar none. You'll get lots and lots of hands-on. So I did do a lot of shelter work, and I noticed that a lot of the dogs who were brought in, they would put on, and I'm sure they do this up here in your city and county shelters, they would put, fractious or caution on some of the cards if the dogs were unhandleable when they were brought in. And a lot of the time, that's because, you're bringing in a dog, and you got some big, male, usually ACO, animal control officer, and he's got a snare pole, and the dog feels like they're fighting for their life. And here it is. Now we're going to put them in a cage because they went into defensive mode, right? Fight or flight instinct. And now we're going to say caution in big red letters. So now nobody can adopt them. So my big thing was, and I'm not saying I went in with the ones who really were, flat out aggressive, but I would, as a volunteer at the shelter, go in with those dogs and see if I could work with them a little bit, and then call somebody over and go, could you take the sign down? So they would get adopted out. So I think that you have to be careful, to really look at, is a dog scared or is a dog aggressive? And we're going to cover quite a bit today. I did also want to mention that you guys all should have an index card. If anybody doesn't, please get one. And the reason you have those cards is not to jot and doodle while I talk. It's actually, but you can. They're actually to write questions on if you would like. I want you guys to ask questions while I'm up here. Please just raise your hand anytime throughout that you have a question. And there's a mic, and somebody will come to you with the mic, actually, because they're videotaping. If any of you have outstanding warrants, you might want to leave now. You'll be on videotape, just so you know. But the cards are actually, because at the end, if there's time, you can write up to 3 questions on there. And if there's time at the end of the seminar, I'm going to go through those and answer them as well. Okay, but if you have a question that pertains to what we're talking about at the time, please raise your hand. The only thing I can't really answer is like long case histories, sort of during the session. Okay? So we're going to cover quite a bit of ground today. We're going to talk about the root causes of fear, which sometimes we coming in when the dog is an adult are going to be able to figure out, and sometimes not so much. We're going to talk about the body language. We've got a bunch of photos to look at and some video. And I think the really important thing also, how to work with fearful dogs. A lot of times, it's interesting because you'll hear me say I have a trainer friend, because it seems that all my friends are trainers. I have a trainer friend back in LA who is absolutely fantastic with aggression. I mean, you give her, and she does Schutzhund work, and she's kind of used to, Malinois and Shepherds with a lot of drive. But you give her a fearful dog, and she calls me and goes, "Do you want this one?" Okay, because she's a very good trainer, and she's a great behavior person, but for some reason, the fearful ones, she just doesn't really have the feeling for working with them. She's not quite sure how to put them at ease, or there's something about it that just doesn't go with her. And I think that actually a lot of trainers are really, really good with behavior and really good with aggression, but fear is kind of a weird little area. So we're really going to shed light on that. I'm curious, how many of you actually work with Marin Humane? How many are you volunteers or staff here? Okay. And how many of you are trainers? You can keep your hands up if you're both. Okay. And rescue shelter? Okay. And owners? Just owners? I mean, I know you're all dog owners. I mean, if you're here not as a rescuer or trainer, just as the owner of a fearful dog, thank you for coming. Good. Okay. I know you all have dogs. And just for people who are not trainers, you know that trainers all have problem dogs, right? That's why we have them. Okay. So a lot of us have dogs with fear issues. A lot of us have dogs with aggression issues. That's why they find us. We have that invisible ink across our forehead, right? Problem dog, come to me. So we're also going to talk about what skills we can teach the dogs that are going to help to make them more confident, that are going to help them in specific situations where they might be fearful. We're also going to talk about what to teach owners. Okay. And the owners in the room, excuse me, because I'll be talking mostly to trainers in this, but this totally applies to you. It's very, very important what's going on at the human end of the leash, and sometimes that makes absolutely all the difference. So we'll be talking a lot about that. And also complementary therapies, meaning, and including pharmacology, just things that can help as well as behavior modification to make the programs a lot more successful. And we'll go through a lot of those. So, this? I have too much hair, sorry. Okay. It's the rock and roll days, Okay. So, okay, anxieties, fears, and phobias. First of all, fear is a continuum. Just like aggression is a continuum, right? We don't have the dog is either fearful or they're not. I want you to start thinking about it as at the low end of the continuum, you have anxiety, okay? Anxiety is not like a phobia, okay? And we all know we get anxious about things. Do you know, by the way, that they say that the biggest fear that humans have is actually public speaking? So you guys have nothing to worry about. I'm the only one. I have a fear of the cold, actually. But anxiety. Anxiety is not actually contingent on the presence of something scary in the room. Okay, I could have come in here and been anxious in general. There might not have been a person in the corner with a hatchet, okay, or someone who's going to heckle me, but I'm just, let's say, anxious in general, okay? A lot of dogs have what we would term in humans free-floating anxiety, okay? It might be genetic. They might just be kind of nervous, fearful in general. Animals can be anxious in new environments, okay? A lot of times if they're genetically predisposed that way, they are going to be anxious when they meet new people, new dogs, when they go to new places. Okay? Again, it doesn't have to be that there is something actually there. If you had something bad happen to you, if you had, let's say, been mugged, and it was a traumatic experience, obviously, if you are then walking down the street, you may have anxiety. It's not that there's actually something there, okay? But there could be. Okay, so anxiety is not dependent on the thing, the trigger, that the thing that's producing the fear actually being present. If you think about it, if you have, let's say, a dog who has potty accidents in the house, and you have an owner who comes home and finds the accident and punishes the dog, which we know we don't want to do after the fact, but this is what they're doing, right? That happens enough times, the dog is going to have anxiety about the owner coming home. Right? So you've got to be really careful about not producing anxiety in dogs. A little bit later with the complementary therapies, we'll talk about ways to bring down generalized anxiety, because a lot of dogs have that. And when you don't have a specific trigger, you're kind of chasing one thing and another thing and another thing. You want to kind of treat the dog as a whole in addition to whatever behavior mod you can do. So chronic anxiety, unfortunately, in people and in dogs can lead to things like a suppressed immune system. Okay, so when you have things like animals at a rescue or at the zoo that are chronically pacing, they're chronically stressed, really, really bad for their health. That's why we all try and do things like environmental enrichment, right, for captive animals. Anxiety also can lead to things like atrophy of the lymphatic glands. This is in people as well. And also gastric ulcers, colitis, things like that. So a lot of times if you have dogs who have that issues, you want to think about, is there some sort of anxiety going on as well? Fear, which is in response to a specific trigger. We have a couple of different kinds of fears. We have phylogenetic fears, which are innate fears. Can anybody give me an example? Innate fear in a dog? What are dogs just genetically afraid of? The vacuum? It may seem that way at times. They shouldn't be, but many are. But sorry? Lightning? Well, yeah. Something sudden, right? Something fast, loud, sudden noise. Okay? Watch wolves sometimes. I mean, you wouldn't believe how fast they move. There's a sudden loud noise, and all of a sudden you're peeling them off the ceiling. Right? Okay, anything else? You can just yell it out if you know. A hose. A hose? Okay. A lot of dogs are afraid of the hose. There's a lot of things that a lot of dogs are afraid of, but they're not actually genetic. Animals actually, and you're right, a lot of dogs are afraid of the vacuum. A lot of dogs are afraid of the hose. A lot of dogs are afraid of things that make noise. But it doesn't mean that that's actually, and it may be genetic in those dogs' cases, which we're going to be talking about. So you guys actually are bringing up a good point. But that's not something that all dogs are afraid of. Things like fire, all animals, it's an instinct, right? When there's an earthquake and the animals have disappeared before the rest of us. I know, when I live in Southern California, and we had, you guys live out here, as well. We had that nice, lovely quake a few years ago, and my dog was out the door so fast. She was out in the yard going, "You're on your own." She knew it was coming. I'm like, "Where's Soko going?" So you'll actually be hearing quite a bit about my dogs throughout this seminar as well, just so you know. Soko is my German Shepherd who passed away, unfortunately, in April at the age of 13. And she had a nice, long, happy, ball-obsessed life, like any good shepherd. And she taught me quite a lot about fear issues. She had many, many fear issues, and so you'll be hearing about her during this. Okay, so apprehension because of what is in front of the dog. Okay, it's a specific fear. Fear is a normal response. It's self-protective, right? That's why we have the fight or flight instinct, which we'll also be talking about. It keeps you alive a lot longer. So we have these phylogenetic or innate fears, and then we have the ontogenic or acquired fears. Okay, why would a dog possibly acquire a fear? Because of learning, because of experience, right? If you hit the dog with a 2x4, the dog is going to be afraid of the 2x4, right? Okay, there's, okay, just to give you an example, Soko, when we did have that earthquake, all the power went out, and so we had to use candles. And for a long, long time, because the candles cast shadows on the wall, and this traumatic thing had happened, and she was so freaked out, for a long time she was afraid of the shadows that were made by candles. So we couldn't have romantic dinners. Soko would just leave. It was very sad. But it was an acquired fear. She wasn't born being afraid of that specifically, right? So if something scares the dog, and that can be other dogs, right? We'll talk about traumatic experience as well. Phobias are extreme. You will know if a dog has a phobia. We often associate phobias with things like thunderstorms, right? And phobic dogs are the ones that are mutilating themselves in the crate because they're so freaked out. They're going through screens to get out. A phobia is instant. It doesn't build up over time. Okay, something happens and boom, it's there. There are ways to work with fears that have to do with repeated exposures, which we'll talk about. And in cases of mild fear, you can habituate the dog to something. Okay, if a dog is very mildly afraid of strangers, let's say you take the dog everywhere with you and they get used to people. With a phobia, you cannot habituate a dog. Okay, repeated exposures without doing other things and without doing behavior mod, just going, here it is again, is not going to make the dog any better. Okay, and we will talk about thunderstorms a little bit later as well, by the way. Not that we get a lot of them out here. Many phobias, in addition to behavior modification, do require intervention with drugs. I am not a fan of just putting dogs on drugs haphazardly at all, but I really do think that if a dog is severely fearful or severely phobic to the point where it is stressing the dog does not have a good quality of life, sometimes putting them on some sort of pharmacological intervention is really the kindest thing to do. And we will be talking about that towards the end of the seminar today. That's done in conjunction with behavior modification. Okay, not just saying, we'll just put the dog on drugs. Okay. So, physiology of fear. The autonomic nervous system, you guys know, is what controls all of our involuntary functions. Things like breathing, respiration, heartbeat, right? That's why people who have an imbalance in their autonomic nervous system, if they get up too fast, their heart's beating really hard and they can't breathe, okay? I know because I have one. Just in case you see me dash across the stage and then go, you'll know. So I feel for these dogs. The autonomic nervous system, of course, is made up of the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. Do you feel like you're back in school now? Do you remember this? Okay. Does anybody remember how you tell the difference? Because I know everybody gets them confused, right? Just remember, sympathetic is what happens, let's say, if a tiger was chasing you, right? You would be very sympathetic to somebody who had a tiger chasing them, wouldn't you? Okay? So you can remember it that way. What happens there is that your heartbeat increases, your respiration increases, and your digestion actually goes down because your system wants to shunt the blood out to your limbs so that you can book it, right? You don't want to be digesting while the tiger's chasing you. The opposite, the parasympathetic is stimulated. We have the heartbeat and the respiration actually decreasing, and digestion increases, and that's when you're nice and calm. That might happen when you're having a nice massage, when you're meditating, okay, when you're really not stressed. The fight or flight response is really not aptly named, and I will explain why. But what happens there is that the hypothalamus, the part of the brain, is stimulated. This initiates a sequence of nerve cells firing, right? And that releases a series of chemicals into the body. We have adrenaline, okay, it's the one that most people know. Also, adrenaline, by the way, is called epinephrine. And noradrenaline and cortisol also are preparing the body for fight or flight. You've ever seen those commercials? I don't know if you have them up here or if it's just a Southern California thing about the cortisol and the belly fat. Have you ever seen that? I often think, God, you just don't want to get stressed because you're going to end up with belly fat, you know? There's a connection. But that is what's physiologically going on in the body. An interesting thing that, do you guys know Turid Rugaas? Some of you do. If you don't, look her up. It's Rugaas. She has a lot of really good information on calming signals, which we'll be talking about as well, body language and so forth. And she's a fellow Norwegian like me. And Turid talks about this as well, that there are actually, when a body releases adrenaline, you know, whether that's just from a dog chasing a ball or running or us, you know, doing aerobics, the adrenaline levels actually come down to normal pretty quickly. They say within about 15 minutes after you're done exercising, right? But the other stress chemicals that were released into the body from the adrenaline, they can actually stay in the body. And there's a little bit of discrepancy between studies on how long, but it can be up to a few days. So if you think about it, you know, if you have a dog who's constantly stressed, they're never really coming down from that. And I know that Turid actually suggests in some cases that, or in a lot of cases, that instead of doing activities like throwing a ball and you know, really chasing, running, that the dog just gets more like, you know, walking. But we'll be talking about this as well. So when the body goes into fight or flight response, right, it's going to be because the dog has to do something. Now, when I say that it's really not named well, there's also other options. It's not just fight or flight, okay? The dog has other choices, and we'll talk about those as well. Fight is going to happen when there's intense fearful arousal, okay? When there's something at close range, when the dog feels they have no other choice, okay? So what kind of situations could a dog be in where they feel that they have no other choice? Well, they could not be able to get away from something, right? That could even mean that the dog is just on a leash. Dog doesn't have any way to go, right? They can hide behind the owner, but that's about it. Very often, if a dog is holding a dog by the collar, an owner is holding their dog, that's really fear-producing. And that can throw that dog into a fight or flight kind of response, whereas it wouldn't have before. You know, I live on a long dirt road, kind of a rural area, and where everybody, you know, they've got horses and llamas, and my neighbor actually has a Brahma bull, which, as a pet, just sort of confused the heck out of me, but why do you have that dog? His name is Scooter. But, go figure. But basically, I'm the only one in my little lovely area who actually gets the concept of fencing for dogs. Unfortunately, it's just not what they do out there. And so when I would take Soko, my shepherd, for walks down the dirt road, you know, the other dogs would come down and so forth, which was not generally a problem. We actually had Blondie, the nice golden retriever next door, who was a total sweetheart, and the two of them were like little old ladies. They'd get together and just, you know, they loved it, and they'd hang out in the sun. But then we had Tom's dogs. And Tom's dogs were Australian cattle dogs. And there were 4 of them. 2 were the adults, and 2 were the parents, and 2 were the pups. And unfortunately, Tom really didn't believe in fences or, you know, wrangling his dogs when they would get off his property. And so here, you know, we'd be going by Tom's place, and these 4 cattle dogs would come tearing down the hill and totally terrorize Soko, which was not okay with me, and I would do things like step in front of her and so forth, okay? But I can tell you that those same dogs who would do that to Soko unfortunately attacked Blondie one day, the golden retriever, and they hurt her pretty badly. I mean, she lived, she was fine, but Blondie was completely traumatized after that. Her owners, who were actually really good, responsible owners, you know, they thought it's fine to let her hang out in front of the house. Nothing's going on our road. She doesn't go away. I mean, they were fine. They didn't want her hanging out in front of the house anymore because Tom's dogs, who might have been worked up from going after Soko for all I know, attacked her dog. So after that, her owners and whoever stayed with them, they had a lot of guests, would know, don't have Blondie out there, you know, off a leash or whatever, unsupervised. And one day I went for a walk with Soko down the road, and Blondie was out there, just, you know, by herself, I thought, and this guy comes running out of the house, and he's like, oh, no, get your dog away, get your dog away. And he was a guest that was staying with them, and he didn't know me. And I said, no, it's okay, I'm the neighbor, these dogs get along, they know each other. He obviously did not believe me. And so Blondie's standing there, and he goes up and he grabs her by the collar. And Blondie, who wouldn't hurt a fly, you know, now she's getting a little tense. She's like, what's wrong? He's grabbing me. What is this? And I'm going, no, really, it's fine. And we're like continuing to walk by, you know, which is bringing us closer to them. He wouldn't believe me. Blondie finally goes, ah! She's probably never done it in her whole life, you know. I'm going, Blondie, what's wrong with you? And I finally got him to just kind of let her go and calm down. And the dogs were fine. Okay, but I know a lot of times when I go into a home as a trainer, if somebody has not listened to the put the dog outside or have the dog somewhere else and the dog is at the door and they start doing this with the collar, especially if the dog has any aggression issues or fear issues to begin with, that can kick the dog over to aggression. You know, and the dog's like lunging and they're pulling and they're lunging and they're pulling. It's the last thing you want going on. Okay, so collar grabbing, never a good idea, but it can kick the dog into sort of a fight or flight mode. Another thing, what if the dog's in a crate? The dog has nowhere to go, right? Classic. You know, the dog's in the crate. The little kid wants to go and play with the doggy, and the doggy's really afraid. They have nowhere else to go. They don't have a choice. Okay, flight, always a good option. If the threat is far away enough, or if there's a way around to get out, most normal, healthy, well-adjusted dogs will choose flight. They don't want to fight, okay? An interesting thing that happens too when the fight or flight instinct is engaged, and this is the same in people as it is in dogs, you are absolutely not thinking clearly, okay? And I think that's a really important thing to remember when you're working with dogs who are really, really scared, you know? I mean, we think, okay, aggressive dogs, dangerous. Fearful dogs, not dangerous. Fearful dogs, yeah, I'm glad you're laughing because you know what? A fearful dog can be really dangerous. If you get them in the wrong situation or, you know, anything could happen. It could have been they had a bad day. They were scared by something earlier in the day and then, you know, you're working with the dog. Fearful dogs can absolutely be as dangerous. They can become fear aggressive, obviously. But you're not going to get a dog who is in fear mode who's really over the top, reacting, to listen to you. They can't, you know? If you're driving on the freeway and a truck cuts you off, you could not tell me what song was playing on the radio at the time. You know, you're just going, oh my God, I have to react. Everything else gets blocked out. And that's why, you know, if a dog is running away and you're going, no, wait, come back, it's fine. The dog, they're just not even hearing it. You're not processing. And you You know, if you've ever been in a situation where you got really hurt and you're really scared and somebody comes over and tries to comfort you or something, you might go on like that. You know, you just do. It's just your instincts. Or maybe it's just me. But the other things that dogs do, freeze, okay? A freeze is usually, the threat is not real close, not right on top of them where they have to react and do something. A freeze can be a momentary thing. It's just all of a sudden the dog's like, la, 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 happy face, all of a sudden, right? They're just going, there was something. They've got to figure out kind of what to do next. They're assessing, is this something I really need to be afraid of? Or is it okay? Can I hang out? Fooling around, and I don't mean what some of you are thinking. They don't start having wild doggy sex. What they start doing is, fooling around would be things like, you know, all of a sudden, I have a client with a fearful dog who, when the dog gets a little stressed overly, because it's a really soft, fearful, sensitive dog, and sometimes when the owner actually gives cues, it comes out a little bit more, you know, sit than it needs to, and the dog will actually start doing this, like running around, sort of, let's play, and she really didn't realize why the dog was doing that. It's a stress thing, right? It's the dog's a little intimidated. So when dogs are stressed, they can do things like go into what looks like play mode, right? They can suddenly discover something fascinating on the ground. Oh, I have to go sniff. I'll be right with you, right? They're just doing other things, and it's good to keep in mind that this may not actually be that, wow, the dog's just bored, or the dog just really saw something over there. Is the dog stressed? Is the dog afraid? Okay, we're going to be looking at a bunch of photos, and these are some of the things that you're going to see in them. These are some of the fear responses physically. Dilated pupils. Did anybody notice that on the first slide? Is that a great photo? Their eyes are like saucers. Okay, so dilated pupils, rapid blinking. Okay, you can also get very slow, pronounced blinking. Elongated eyes. Okay, the eyes get a little, I'm worried. Okay. Closed mouth, and the closed mouth will very often go with the freezing. Again, happy, ha, 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 ha. Right? All of a sudden closed mouth. You'll be seeing some of that on the video. Or the mouth can open and close. My shepherd did that all the time, just kind of, right? I look like a guppy, don't I? It's always good to do that when there's videotape. Puffy flews. Do you guys all know what I mean by flews? Flews are, I'm not going to puff up my flews. You will see a nice photo of a golden retriever puppy doing this, however. They're just kind of the upper lips up here. Soko also did that a lot. We'd say she's making the puffy face. She'd do it when she's just a little nervous. Her mouth would close and her little flews would get puffy. These are things that are very subtle. And if you're not looking for them, you're not going, hey, look, the dog's got dilated pupils and puffy flews, right? But they are things that you kind of get used to noticing. Ears back, we all know, right? Classic sign. Muscle tension. And a lot of times you can feel that if you're at the end of the leash, you know? You don't even have to look at the dog. You can just kind of sense that the dog's all of a sudden tensed up. Interestingly enough, I do find that a lot of owners do notice the muscle tension, you know? Because, I mean, we'll be on a walk and I'll say, okay, I want you to tell me when you think your dog starts, you know, reacting to the thing they're afraid of, and they'll be like, oh, now look at how his body just went like this, you know? So that's kind of a pretty obvious sign. Tail lowered and tucked. Obviously, if it's a sight hound, the tail's lowered and tucked anyway in a lot of cases. You have to know the dog's normal tail carriage, but lower than usual. Tucked, we're protecting, right, the anal genital region. Also covering up the scent glands, right? Not I'm here, as opposed to the cocky tail, which is like up here waving like a flag. Let me disperse my scent all over the place. That's my other dog. That's Mojo, who you'll be hearing about. He's a Rottweiler German Shepherd Malamute mix. He's my baby. He's my baby. He's 13, but he's going to live forever. We have a deal. So, but also you will get body lowering. If a dog is really, really afraid, I mean, they're going to lower not just a little bit, but all the way to the floor, preferably trying to find something to crawl under a lot of the time. You will find also the head or the paw raise. You know, there's lots of reasons why a dog might raise a paw, and we often call it like an appeasement gesture, right? So if a dog is really scared, they may just kind of raise the paw up a little bit, usually towards a person or towards another dog. But I have seen dogs do this just with things that they were afraid of as well, just kind of, right? And their whole body is going to be kind of leaning away from the thing, not going towards it, obviously. Their head or their body may be turned away. right? If they get really stressed. Lip licking, which is hard to say 3 times fast. Lip licking can be up or down, but it is usually repetitive, and it's usually pretty quick. The dog's not going, that was a good meal, okay? They're going, and you'll see it a lot at vets' offices where dogs are nervous, any kind of situation. In training classes where the dogs are stressed, unfortunately, you'll see a lot of it. You'll also see yawning, and I mentioned to Rodriguez before, she calls these calming signals. Wolf pathologists call these cutoff signals. It's kind of like the dog is saying, I've had enough, make it stop, uncle. We also have signals, restlessness, which we talked about in captive animals. And by the way, that you guys have like a booklet where you actually, if you haven't opened it yet, these slides are in there. So if you're frantically writing it all down, you don't have to. You're working too hard. Okay? Just relax. Restlessness, hyperactivity, pacing, vigilantly scanning the environment. Again, had you been mugged and you were walking down the street, you'd be doing this. You'd be wanting to know what's ahead, what's going on. Dogs that have anxiety very often show that. Piloerection, meaning that the fur is up on the back. Most people think of this as putting the hackles up, just around the shoulders. It's not necessarily only the hackles. Piloerection can happen from the neck all the way down to the tail. And I'm going to tell you that with fearful dogs, I often see that, all the way down to the tail. It's not always an indication of aggression. It can be an indication of fear. It can be also just an indication of arousal in general. Okay? I have seen, there is a wolf that I know of who, he's just a big goofball really, and he's a big wolf, but he's sort of the omega, he's the bottom of the totem pole. And when he plays with the other wolves, all his hackles are up, from his neck down to his tail. And it's not because he thinks he's like large and in charge, it's because he's just like, okay, do you want to play with me? I'm not sure. Okay? So again, not always a sign of aggression. Shallow breathing, panting. I thought about this on the plane, actually, where, the stewardess comes out and tells you about those little cup oxygen masks that drop, and they actually tell you, put it over your mouth and nose and continue to breathe normally. Is anybody going to be breathing normally if we're going to crash? Not me. So, shallow breathing and panting. Shaking off. We've all seen this, not just because the dog is wet, because the dog was a little bit stressed by something. Okay, okay, that's over with. And shaking off is not always a sign of stress either, by the way. I sit there and I really have my hands on Mojo all the time. I'm petting him and giving him tummy rubs. And sometimes he will stand up and walk away and I'm like, oh, thanks. But it's not fear, okay? Scratching, sniffing, stretching. These can all be, again, cutoff signals, right? Signs that the dog is a little bit stressed. The scratching is usually, let's say that the thing that is causing the dog fear is right in front of them. It'll be sort of back here. It'll be like, I'd love to confront you, but I'll be right with you. I have this itch. Okay? The Soko did this all the time. I could always tell you within like a second when she was going to start doing that when Mojo was being a bully. Or she would do sniffing, which is, there's something really fascinating over here. I would love to confront you, but you know what? Look at this. And she'd do this. Okay, it's kind of a cutoff signal. Some dogs will actually go and get water. That's kind of a timeout also. I'm sure you guys who do shelter work see that. Decreased thick salivation, drool, okay, or profuse watery salivation. And approach avoidance behavior, which you will see a lovely example of in the video that I'm going to be showing you in just a little bit. It's very, very important because we have these signals that are like, ears back and tail tucked, the more obvious ones, that people know what the normal tail set is and what the normal ear position is. Because if you're not really, most people have a vague idea of that, but if you had a picture right now, the exact tail set of your dog, and some breeds, like northern breeds, it's kind of curled up anyway. But it's not just how much the tail curls. It's actually at the base of the tail that's attached to the butt. Does it sit up here? Does it sit down there? How is it normally? Okay, and then you have the curl up or the curl down. So it's important to know what does normal look like so that you have something to compare it to. Also, tail wagging, we all know, is not necessarily a sign of a happy dog. Many dogs who are anxious will not only lower their tails, but they will be wagging. And they'll be wagging in a small, tight arc, right? That's a little nervous. It can be a little submissive as well, as opposed to the cocky tail waving like a flag. There was actually a study that was done in 1958 by a guy named Mahout who demonstrated an example of fear responses in different breeds. And I just thought this was interesting, especially being a shepherd owner, who are kind of like the poster dogs. Oh, well, that was a different one. This is the beagles. I'll tell you about that one later. You'll be hearing about lots of studies, by the way. This is about fear responses and the difference in different breeds. And what he looked at was fear responses in beagles and fear responses in terriers, although it didn't say specifically what type of terriers. And when they were frightened, the beagles would freeze. Does anybody want to guess what the terriers would do when they were frightened? Anybody else? I get this. Anybody else? Charge? Close? They would actually run around frantically. Yeah. Which I don't know how you can tell the difference, because they're just, yeah. Okay. Let's talk about lesser known responses. Those of you who teach group classes may have seen this, perspiring paw pads. If you teach a class like on a regular floor, that's where you can see afterwards. If you have a fearful, nervous dog, when that dog leaves, there's going to be little imprints of paws on the floor. Blowing or shedding fur. This is also something you see if you teach group classes. You're having to clean the area afterwards because there's like just bunches of fur. So dogs can definitely blow fur. They can get dandruffy if they're really stressed. I don't know if people can, but I don't know if well, I guess you would start losing your hair if you were really anxious enough about something, right? Loss of appetite. A dog who is really, really stressed. We see a lot of dogs with separation anxiety. They won't eat when their owners are gone. A lot of them don't want water either. Although some dogs, again, if they are stressed, they do want water because your mouth gets dry. Diarrhea. Okay, I'm going to tell you a story, but I probably shouldn't. Especially because we're being filmed, but it's okay. When I was working with the wolf rescue, one of the things that I did was to transport the wolves from people's homes to the rescue center. I hated transporting the wolves. It was, honest to God, my least favorite part. I would scoop poop any day over doing this because they were, without a doubt, always really, really, really stressed. And they were in a crate, of course, with bungee cables and wire and everything else, because they tended to eat their way out of the crate. But at the time, this is way back when, at the time I drove one of those little boxy Honda Civic wagons, if you guys remember those. They look like a big square. And so there's not much room between the back seat and the front. And I picked up this wolf, and I needed to drive her up to the center. And I faced the crate, facing the front of the car, because at the time I was thinking, she can see me, maybe she'll feel better, I can see what she's doing back there. Bad idea. All I can say is most wolves, when you transport them, will have something coming out one end or the other. And this animal did poop in the crate, but then, and that was fine, I had the windows open, I expected it, it's no big deal. But then we hit the freeway, and she completely freaked out. And so there is a dog, a wolf, who's, pooed in the crate and is now doing this frantically. And if you would have driven up to the side of me, you would have said that's where they get the word shitstorm from. Because there's me hunched over the wheel and there's just stuff going on the ceiling and the windshield. Horrible. Bad. My life in wolves. So yeah, you can get not only the poop, but the frantic behavior as well. You don't ever want them together. Okay, excessive grooming. Excessive grooming, that means that the dog is chewing usually at their paws, right? They can be pulling out tufts of fur. This is very, very often, well, it can be other things. It can be allergies, we know, but it can also be anxiety. Extreme fear. We have trembling. This is like when the dog is phobic, right? The dog is trembling and shaking. This is really sad to see. Soko used to do that now and then. Where I live, it's right over the hill from a place called Mystery Mesa, where they do a lot of filming. And they actually filmed the explosive sequences for War of the Worlds there. I know. I have a dog who is noise sensitive, and they film all kinds of stuff, and it doesn't always make noise. They are actually supposed to always give you a notice in your mailbox if you're a resident saying, we will be filming, here are the dates. They actually neglected to tell us, and I was actually on the phone with a friend, and a helicopter blew up outside my window. And That was my fear or fear response. I actually freaked out completely. I was like, and called the fire department, who said, oh, no, they're filming. It's no big deal. But I can tell you that there was a lot of that kind of thing going on, which was not really good for Soko at all. Not really good for me at all either. But you would get things like extreme, like trembling when that stuff went on. To be honest with you, I was shaking when that happened. I've never seen a helicopter blow up outside my window before. Drooling, vomiting, expression of anal glands, which has its own particular smell, evacuation of bowels, urination, catalepsy, meaning this, and again, this is extreme fear, meaning that the dog is actually like unable to move. They're like cataleptic, and it happens. It's rare, but it does happen. And also hypoalgesia, which is actually a loss of sensitivity to pain. So if you think about it, you've got these fearful dogs, and some trainers who unfortunately feel that the way to work with a dog who is reactive in any way, whether it's fear reaction, fear aggression or what, is to just correct the crap out of the dog. Here it is, if the dog is really afraid and having this hypoalgesia effect where he can't feel pain, and you're trying to do this, you're just going to keep doing it harder and harder, which is horrible. Okay? And again, that's a temporary thing. It's kind of like because your body's being flooded with all those chemicals, right? You just don't feel it. Here's our little friend from the beginning. I know, everybody was walking and going, aw, this poor dog. So we're going to take a look at a bunch of photos. And what I would like is for you guys to actually, and you don't have to raise your hand on this one, but I would like for you to just sort of yell out, what do you see here? What stress signals or fear signals do you see? Sorry? Whale eye. Okay, so you see how the whites of the eyes there? Okay. And closed mouth. That dog is like, right? Dilated pupils. That dog's pupils are like saucers. Look how much of its eye the pupil is taking up, right? What else? Ear back. Yeah, we got one ear back. And that ear back thing, Soko did this a lot. It's not always both ears, flattened down like we think about. Soko would very often, when she got a little nervous about something, one ear would go boop. You'd always know. Okay, so we've got one ear back here. Anything else? Tens. Yeah, you can see. You don't have to see the rest of this dog's body to know that it's like this, do you? Okay, you can actually see, and you can see sort of out here, you can see the muscle tension in the face, can't you? Yeah. Yes. Good. Yes. The brow. Can you all see the brow is kind of furrowed up here? Okay. It's not a Sharpay impression. I'm a little nervous. Okay. And yeah, right here, look in the corners of the mouth. Do you see how there's tightness in here? Okay. Good. Anything else? Yeah, this is not a dog who's like happy, confident going towards something. This is a dog who's like, you said what? Okay, right? Good. How about this dog? This poor guy. The lips, yeah. The lips are actually, not only is the mouth closed, but the lips are retracted. You see how they're pulled back here? Okay. That's like? Almond eyes, yes, exactly. We have elongated eyes and we have elongated mouth, right? Anything else? Ears, yeah, where are the ears? They're way the heck back here. Okay. Yeah, this dog's on the ground. This dog is kind of, yeah, he's laying down, but there's obviously something going on. He's not just kicking it, right? Okay. Anything else? Is he doing the puffy flu? He is a little bit, actually. Yeah, good call. Yeah, you can see a little bit. I don't have a laser pointer, but you guys can see a little bit over there. I was afraid they would, have me for a terrorist on the plane. I didn't want to carry one. But there, you can see a little bit. You'll see the puffy flues actually a lot more, obviously, in another photo, though. Anything else? Yes, who said that? Good. I was hoping somebody would notice that. Yeah, do you see? Look here. Okay? These here, this is not like a dog whose feet are flat on the floor, who's just relaxed. This is like, yeah, okay? A lot of tension. And you can see the tension in the dog overall. He's kind of like, what is that thing over there? Puffy, I know, I love this. This is actually a dog that was one of my clients' dogs who I just loved. This is the puffy flu poster child. Actually, you can see out here, little puffy flues. Okay, anything else? Yeah, you can really see it up here on this one, can't you? Okay, so he's got that. These are not his normal happy eyes. I wish I actually had a photo of what this dog normally looks like, but you've seen Golden Retriever puppies. I mean, his eyes are normally wide and happy. They're not like this. Anybody else? Yeah, she said you can't even tell if the ears are back because they're so dropped. Okay, yeah, this is not kind of my normal happy sort of ear set either. Okay, good. I mean, his mouth is closed, right? He's just obviously not happy. Oh, a laser pointer. I don't see it on there, do you?
It's right there. Push the button.
I have the power. Thank you. I'll try not to kill it. Okay. Now I'm going to point just because I can. Here we have two different dogs that are obviously not to scale. I thought this was so interesting because you really do have like two brown dogs, one ear back, one ear forward, but what's the difference? Yeah, we have our little friend from the other slide. And then this dog, is this dog afraid? No. But what's the difference? So this dog does also have one ear back and one ear forward. What's his mouth doing? I mean, look at the difference. Yeah, he really is just about smiling, isn't he? This dog's like, life is good, right? This is like how Mojo would be, just, oh, you know. He does not appear to have a lot of tension in his body. His body does not appear to be hunched or forward or back. He's just kind of hanging out. What about this one? Look at this. Okay, you see all the tension back? Don't you just want to give him a massage? This poor dog is like, okay? So you can really see the difference on those. I know. It's just sad, isn't it? This poor little guy, this is not his normal tail set, obviously. He is also low, really low to the ground. Okay, what else do you notice here? Sorry? Sucked in muscle around here. Yeah, you can see all the muscle tension around the area. Very good. Okay. The weight? Oh, whale eye. Yes, look at this. Okay, I'm never going to stop using this now. Look at this. Okay, whale eye. Okay. Yeah, the ears are way back. Good. Tension. Who said that? Tension in his mouth. Yeah, look at it. Yeah, look at the cheeks over here. Look at the muscles. Okay, this is like, and I'm given it's a bull terrier and it's a muscular dog, but still. Okay, they're really, really tense. And he really is lowering his whole body. He's just kind of like, what's going on? The eyes are sort of elongated, right? Yeah, exactly. He's like, I'm not going. Okay? And he just, I mean, if we could put a look to it, we would say he looks almost suspicious, right? He's like, what is that? I don't know. I'm not sure. He's nervous about something. This dog, we don't actually know what's going on in this picture for sure, but we do know that the dog does not look really anxious and happy to go towards whatever it is on the other side of the photo. Here we have the appeasement. It could be an appeasement gesture if there was a person over there. Again, we don't know. But again, dog's just a little nervous. We have a little paw raise. Okay, what else do you see here? Yeah, look at that tail. That is really tucked even though he's sitting. Good, that's hard to see with the sitting. Okay, we have the ears that are back. We have mouth. Yeah, tight. It's really tight, isn't it? Okay. Thank you. Yes, exactly. She said that's not a comfortable sit. Okay? So, yeah, dog not happy. Here we have, this was actually one of my client's dogs too. That's a little Chihuahua named Peanut, who was afraid of a lot of things actually. But this is actually a portrait that he had up in a frame at his house. And I said, could I have a copy of that? It's so cute. So yeah, here we have the lip licking. And the lip licking, at least Peanut looked at the camera. This is Wesley, another one of my client's dogs, who is not only doing the lip licking, but turning away. You guys know, I mean, when you take pictures of dogs, I'm well trained. Okay. You know when you take photos of dogs or videotape, very often they're turned away or they're licking their lips. A lot of people say, I have all these pictures of my dog where he's sticking his tongue out at the camera. Well, because he's stressed. You're pointing something at him. Yawning. Okay. That's a cute dog, isn't it? Okay. Yawning, and it's very important to realize, too, that dogs lick their lips anyway. They yawn anyway. It's not like every time your dog yawns or every time your dog licks his lips, he's upset or he's nervous or he's afraid. But you will start to notice it. You know, when you start looking for it, you'll see it in different situations. I went to a training class to observe somebody else's class. And I used to teach a lot of group classes, and at some point I just went into sort of in-home behavior modification instead. And I wanted to find somebody else in my area who taught really good group classes so that I could say, you know, go there. And so I went around and I watched a couple of them, and unfortunately a lot of them were still sort of the old, you know, jerk the choke chain kind of coercive training. And I watched one of those, and there was a woman in the class who had a German Shepherd who was very stressed by whatever was going on in the class. And the dog kept doing things like jumping up on her, which again is another thing that can happen. It's just anxiety. You know, the dog's like, come on, Mom, come on, can we go? I'm not liking this. And every time the dog would jump on her, the trainer would say, correct the dog. Don't let the dog jump on you. And you know, and the dog's yawning, and the trainer's going, you know, your dog is bored. You know, you need to do something. The dog's not bored. The dog is really, really stressed. You know, it was all I could do not to run in there and grab the dog. Stay back. You can't tell if they have wrinkly foreheads or not, okay? My brother used to breed Shar-Pei puppies, and this was actually a litter of pups that he bred. Are any of these dogs looking at the camera? And I'm going, come on, guys, look. Nothing, okay? And this one's yawning, okay? Looks like a little rhinoceros, doesn't it? Oh, cute. Okay, we are going to have a video, courtesy of, and his reaction to it. Okay, this will be very obvious. And also, just so you know, towards the tail end of this, and there's other dogs you'll see in this as well, but towards the tail end of this, you will see a golden retriever come into the picture. This golden retriever also had fear issues, believe it or not. It was a golden pup, and they had brought the pup to the class, even though he wasn't in the class, just to be around other dogs and around other people, and that dog was really stressed, and Simba was really stressed. So you'll see what happens there towards the end of this. Okay, so... do we need to darken the room? Can we? Yeah, we can. Can you guys see that? Okay. Okay, so ears back. Okay. Hors d'oeuvre walking by. There is actually audio. Sure.
Near as bad as.
Oh, I'm sure. You guys are doing great. Did you see the lip lick?
Right up on top.
At least he's not just she's shaking. He's not gonna have a heart
See his mouth?
Okay, let's put a little bit down on their mats. We're gonna use this.
Yawning. Yeah, ears. Sniffing around.
Let me know if you want me to
Oh
do
yeah.
it.
You see his whole body moving.
The bigger one.
And licking. Opening and closing the mouth.
Chloe's supposed to be here, so that's another subject.
I know, and so is my Rottweiler.
And she may be giving him signals. She's
I
trying to
talked
keep his
Christy,
attention
she
as
said
well.
she wasn't going to come, but I said, I go, the other trainer that I know, I says, come in, it's going to help Simba. So,
Fire for positive behavior. Now your dog starts.
Well, you know, what he does at home when he's happy, so he's actually cheering up. He wraps himself around me so that there's no way that I can actually turn around and grab him, so he's got his defense mode on. But you know what? If that's his form of affection for me, so be it.
And she loves this dog, okay? She's a good owner. She just doesn't really get. Mm-hmm. She's been
I'm
told
like
a lot
the
of
only
times
one
about
that
it.
can pet him.
But he's better than he was.
Oh yeah.
He's a lot better than he was, just so you know.
Do fastest sit.
Oh yeah.
Fastest in the West.
You want to try?
That's what we're going to play. So what we're doing.
Okay, so she's doing touches with him to try and keep him kind of focused, right? Yeah, his whole body's kind of leaning away. She got him at a couple of months old.
This was also a little different because, like I was telling
Another
you,
shepherd in the
we've
class.
always, when we've done the sit, done it from focus.
Satellite dishes
a
for
focus
ears.
position into a sit. Here we're moving, and then all of a sudden we're stopped and sitting.
Yeah, yawning here too,
I think
little lip
kind of-
licking. Bad hips. Okay, we're back to Simba. Okay.
Let's get distracted. Remember, like we're not doing it from a stay. You're letting the dog get distracted and calling the dog in a second.
You see the mouth opening and closing? Yeah, he's hypervigilant. He's looking around constantly. This is actually a small group class. There's only about, I think, 4 or 5 other dogs in this class, and it is in a parking lot behind a pet store, so there's plenty of space. I'm sorry, hold on, she's coming with a mic. Can you ask again?
When you see the hand shyness, can you tell from the response whether it's because they had a bad experience or whether it's a fearful temperament?
Okay, good question. And the answer is no, you can't actually, unless you really know what went on with that dog. We're going to talk next about the root causes of fear, and it's really hard to tell. The only thing we can tell for sure is that Simba is not liking this, right? And again, this is a really good owner. This is an owner who takes the dog to class. This is an owner who calls trainers. This is, an owner who really is mostly in tune with what Simba's doing, just can't help herself from doing this, and that's okay. I mean, she may have been a little nervous in the class situation also. So I do think actually the part with the golden retriever is on the second one, so you've already heard the intro. Oh, sorry, there's a mic coming.
He never flinched when she came from the front, only from the top.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, when she was coming under or she was in front of him, he wasn't flinching. But yeah, absolutely over the head. How common is that? I mean, kids especially, they go to pet a dog, hand down over the head, and the dog's like this. Or sometimes the dog's like that and nips them, right? Unfortunately. So let's talk about some root causes of fear. And obviously, some dogs have a predisposition, right? It's their genetic blueprint. They are just fearful. It's unfortunate, but it happens. The really interesting thing about this that you guys might not know is that the things that are stressing the mother emotionally during the gestation period before the puppy is even born can have an effect on that puppy's temperament, okay? And that's why it's so, so important to have good breeders. If you're going to breed dogs, you better know what you're doing. Because if there's a lot of stress in the environment, a lot of them don't know. Okay, a lot of them are thinking, well, we take the puppies out and we socialize them a little and, that's it. We're great. But it's not. There's actually a quote from Steve Lindsay who says that emotional stressors affecting the mother during gestation, together with excessively stressful postnatal conditions, may exert a lifelong detrimental influence on the way dogs cope with fear and anger-provoking situations. Okay, that's huge. We also know that together the heredity combined with those things can actually destine many young dogs to express reactive traits and tendencies before they open their eyes. Okay? So it's not always a lack of socialization. It's not always that the dog's had a traumatic experience, been abused, and so forth. It could actually have started back then. So how do we know if something's genetic? Well, it's hard to tell, obviously, unless you really know the parents of the dog. Coming in as trainers, we don't get to see that very often, right? So yeah, if the parents of the pups are skittish, certainly you can tell, but you will also know that if you are looking at a litter of pups, if you're helping clients to select a puppy or you're going out to select one, the puppies that you pick up should be sort of all over the place. The fearful pup, okay? The fearful pup is going to be rigid. Okay, it's not going to be all puppy-like and sort of everywhere. We also have, the puppy tests, the temperament tests, where you drop the ring of keys, and every puppy is pretty much going to startle at that. But what you were looking for is a fast recovery, right? In general, there are some dogs, however, that are what we would call globally fearful. And globally fearful meaning the dog is just anxious and nervous in general. The dog may be afraid of people, other dogs, new places, new sounds. This is just kind of where that dog is coming from. Its genetic fear is often characterized by a chronic, lifelong, generalized fearfulness. A lot of those dogs have an extreme or a heightened fear of sensory input. Okay? A lot of them are very noise sensitive. My dog Soko was that way. And I do think that it was genetic with her, unfortunately. I am seeing, I don't know about you guys in this area, but I am seeing a lot of German Shepherds who are extremely, I see all the heads going like this, extremely noise sensitive, just sensitive in general, skittish, particularly the American bred lines, unfortunately. And I'm sure, it's in a lot of other breeds as well. Genetic fear is one of the hardest things to work with, obviously. It's genetic, okay? But that does not mean that you can't work with it. It doesn't mean that you can't modify the behavior. You've got a certain blueprint that comes with the dog, but even within the range of what's possible for that dog, absolutely progress can be made. And I can tell you from having Soko all those years, absolutely. Was she ever going to be a golden retriever and everything's great, the sky is blue? No. But for who she was, she made great progress. So that's the good news. This is the one that I was actually starting to tell you guys about before. I'm really ahead of myself today with the video and the studies. The study that was done to show that breed actually had an effect was done by Kruszinski in 1960. And what he did was he studied the influence of rearing dogs in isolation. So these dogs were not allowed to be around anything. Okay, they had no sensory input really. They had no people coming. They had no other dogs around. And what he was looking to study was the isolation on the development of fear-based aggressive behaviors. And he had two breeds. One was German Shepherds, and the other one was Airedales. And does anybody have a guess as to how this sentence ends? The passive defense reaction developed more acutely and reached a greater degree in the German Shepherds, kept in isolation compared to the Airedales. Okay, so breed absolutely does have something to do with it. There is also a really interesting thing, and if anybody has this study, let me know, because I was able to find the abstract, but I've never been able to find the actual full study. But it was done in 1991 by Schulselser and Stagg, and it showed that some fears, although they are genetic, do not show up until after a year of age. And he was in particular talking about sound sensitivities. So you think about all those people dropping rings of keys for the puppies. And the puppies are going, it's fine, we're not that startled. Yeah, come back when we're about 11, 12 months old, though. Yeah. Lack of socialization is a huge one. And we have two things going on. When people get puppies, they're hearing from their vets, of course, don't bring the puppy anywhere until the puppy has had all their vaccinations, which is usually complete at 16 weeks. Okay, depending maybe on the part of the country, but 16 weeks, they've had their last 6-in-1, they've had their rabies vaccination. Now you can start taking the puppy out. Puppy has missed a huge, huge opportunity. Window of socialization in a puppy, meaning where you can actually expose that puppy to things, and that puppy is much, much less likely to be stressed or afraid of those things later in life, is going to be between 4 and 12 weeks. Okay? Most people do not get puppies from the breeder or wherever they come from until they're about 7 weeks, sometimes 8 weeks, right? So obviously the breeder or whoever has the puppy early on has a lot to do with this. Unfortunately, a lot of times that doesn't happen. They're not getting the early socialization. And it's not all vets that are saying that. There are vets that understand the puppy should have, obviously, input and meet people and other dogs and so forth. But there's a lot more that I have found that are saying don't take the puppy anywhere. I've had quite a few clients who were under the impression that they weren't allowed to take their puppy into their backyard until the puppy was 4 months old. You've heard that too? Yeah. So here you have a dog who hasn't seen other dogs, except for the litter mates way back when maybe, who hasn't seen people, who hasn't been exposed to sounds of the road and everything else. And now the dog is having reactions. It's not that you can't socialize a dog after the 12 weeks. It's just that it gets more and more difficult the older the dog gets when he hasn't been exposed to those things. So definitely lack of socialization is huge. Basically, raising any young animal, a dog, anything, in an environment where there is not a lot of variety and a lot of sensory input, you're going to end up with an animal who not only maybe doesn't have as good problem-solving skills as they get older, but is going to have a lot harder time coping with things. Okay. When our dogs were puppies, we did crazy things. We cranked up the stereo, we danced around the living room. I mean, we did all kinds of things because I wanted them to see all that because they were going to see it later, So whatever it is, don't say, no, we don't want to scare the puppy. We want to get the puppy used to those things. Abuse, unfortunately, is something that, number one, is real. I mean, yeah, there are dogs who are abused, and that's why they're afraid, rightly so. However, there's a lot more dogs who were not properly socialized, who were just ignored and neglected. And the unfortunate thing that happens a lot of time, especially when people adopt a dog from a shelter or a rescue, if that dog is a little bit fearful, they think, oh, the dog was abused. I can't tell you how many phone calls I get from clients where they call me and they just inform me on the phone, I have a dog who was abused. Well, how would you know that? I mean, it's possible that they do know. I mean, I have had a client who actually took a dog out of an abusive situation, but unless you really know the dog's background, you can't say that dog was abused. He may have a fear of hands. He may have a fear of feet. It does not necessarily mean he was, kicked or manhandled. Okay? And the scary thing, and the thing that makes it more difficult for those dogs, is if the person really does think, oh, poor puppy, puppy's been abused, they tend to really, really coddle them, and that is not going to help a fearful dog. I mean, we'll be talking about that later, but coddling, just like with kids, I mean, they're not going to learn to stand on their own 2 feet or their own 4 paws if you're coddling them, right? When I used to do group classes, there was always somebody with a fearful dog in the class. I mean, it's just what, it's the percentages. However, usually the puppies would run under their legs and so forth. They'd pick them up, right? And if I could get them to stop doing that, which they did, the puppy would start to kind of peek out and start to go out a little bit. And next thing you knew, that dog was like a little social butterfly running around the room. But it's not going to happen if they're always in the owner's arms. That's why we have so many fear-reactive Chihuahuas. I don't think they come out of the box fear-reactive. I think they're up here in mom's arms, like this is where they live, right here. I'm up here. I have my mom with me. So I think we're going to cut it here. We're going to take a 15-minute break. Okay. Don't forget also, if you have questions, write them on your blue cards. You can turn them in at lunchtime. Okay. I can't believe only one of you wants to know anything. Okay. Guys, we're going to get started. Watch. Attention. Here's a cookie. A couple of people came up to talk to me during the break. Hello. And one of them was Alan, who made a very good point, actually, we were talking about socialization, early socialization and so forth, and he was saying, dogs that are brought up in the country where there's not a lot of sounds, there's not a lot of going on, and then they move to the city where there's buses and there's, traffic noise and people acting differently and so forth. That can also obviously cause a fear issue. I did not have that as one of the causes, but that can certainly happen as well. We actually, interestingly enough, had something the opposite happen in a way when I lived more. I live about 45 minutes outside of Los Angeles, and when I lived more in the city, Mojo had he had a dog aggression issue. He wasn't really dog aggressive so much as dog obnoxious. He would just kind of like run up and bully them. He wouldn't really hurt them, but he'd just sort of really, cocky tail, the whole 9 yards. And I worked with him, and he got to be really good. He could be around other dogs. He was fine. And then when we moved out to what's more like the country, he just sort of desocialized because he really didn't see a lot of other dogs out there. So, you can get the same thing going on when you treat fear issues. If the dog gets over a fear and then isn't exposed to it for a very long time and then is exposed again, it can be recurring. Okay? So aggression is not like forever fixed. The fear issue is not forever fixed either. I'm going to talk about traumatic experience, and somebody actually also had a great point about traumatic experience. And she had a dog that was being transported to come into a rescue, and that dog was transported in a crate in the car and had been born at a shelter. Where is she? Where are you? The person who told me about the dog in the crate and the drilling? Oh, you're all in my imagination, right? Okay, maybe she's still in the ladies' room. I promise it happened, it did. First the videos and now this. It's old age, it's hell. Okay. Well, I promise you, she did say this. The dog had actually been born at a shelter. The dog had actually never been exposed to a crate before and was transported in the crate and was, drooling in the car and not happy being in the crate. And that dog just absolutely is really, really fearful of the crate, refuses to go in it. So, that's a traumatic experience, right? The dog associated that feeling of uncomfortable and sick and everything else and maybe being scared of being in the car with the crate. And that happens a lot when dogs are shipped, doesn't it? A dog comes off an airline flight, and it's, God, how much more traumatic can that be sound-wise, So traumatic experiences obviously can leave a long-lasting impression. It can be with another dog. Soko, my shepherd, who, by the way, if you want to know what Soko looks like, go down that hallway that goes to the restroom. There's a portrait on the wall of a shepherd named Annie, who looks identical to my German shepherd. It was just very odd. And also, by the way, on the front cover of your book, me with that dog, that's Mojo. In case you want to know who I was talking about. That's my other baby. But yeah, unfortunately, Soko, when she was very young, and I did used to take her to a little park near our house where there were other dogs there. It wasn't specifically a dog park, but she was sort of traumatized by another shepherd, a large white German shepherd, and the dog it was just an unfortunate thing, and the dog came running at her, and there was no damage, but she really was not happy about that. And at first she was thinking big white dogs are a scary thing. And then she had a run-in with another dog sometime later, and she generalized those experiences to, I'm now afraid of all dogs, which we then had to treat. So definitely one or two things. And I often think that the dogs that are just really smart and really make associations quickly, it's kind of a double-edged sword because they're really, really easy to train, but they also make fearful associations really quickly as well. And maybe that's part of the reason why there is so much fear in the German Shepherds, because they are one breed that definitely is that way, and of course there are others. Learned or associative fears is where a dog learns that one thing predicts another. For example, I had a client's dog, who was afraid of the sprinklers in the yard and wouldn't pee. The original reason that she called me was because she really, really wanted this dog to urinate in like a particular area of the yard. She had kids, and she, just didn't want the pee all over the place, and that's reasonable. And the problem was she wanted this one spot, and she said the dog just will not go there. And we went and looked at it, and there was a sprinkler head. And the dog had actually learned, we found out, that the sprinkler heads pop up and things go like that. And so she had associated that thing with the sprinklers. Mojo, my dog, I've been taking him for, 9 days in a row to a place that's an hour away from my house to have something called pulsed signal therapy. Do any of you know what that is? Yeah? Okay. It's great. If you have older dogs who have arthritis or, hip problems or anything like that, I would suggest that you look into it, actually. Pulsed signal therapy. It's really, really been helping Mojo. But I can tell you that he has never had a problem getting into my Jeep to go places, but I have taken him every day, because it's a 9-day-in-a-row thing. Every day up until yesterday, when I got on the plane, we were doing this. And by day 3, he did not want to get in the Jeep. And it's not that it was a bad treatment. All he has to do is lay in a tube, basically, and just hang out. But he didn't want to get in because he knew that it was predictive. And we see this with dogs that are never taken anywhere but the vet and the groomer. If they don't like the groomer, they don't want to get in the car. In fact, the third day when Mojo started doing that, I looked at my husband. I was like, do I have to put him in the car and drive him through McDonald's a few times? Because it really would have given him a much better association, right? So learned or associative fears, something that happens before the actual fear-eliciting event, right? The dog starts learning that it's predictive. Yes? Pulsed signal therapy, what does it mean exactly? What it is, and I'll just talk about this really briefly, because I really do think it's helpful, and I want you guys to know about this. It is like a little donut thing, like an MRI tube, but it's not the whole tube, it's just a donut. And the part of the dog's body that's afflicted, like in my dog's case, his hips and his back area, would be in the tube. And it actually sends these impulses. And I don't know technically exactly scientifically how it works, but there's something about the rate of the pulses that are going into the dog that simulates the pulsing of the nerves. And maybe somebody else here knows more about it, but I can tell you that what it's meant to do is to decrease inflammation, which you often have with a dog who has arthritis. And it's also supposed to stimulate the regrowth of cartilage. Okay. So, like lasers, ladies get lasers and it's supposed to re-stimulate the collagen, So it's going on up to 6 months from the therapy, you start to see the benefits actually. And we did already see benefits after probably like the 5th day. What I saw was my dog being able to stand up a lot easier from a down. And his eyes looked brighter. He just looked like he had more vitality. Yeah, until it was time to get into the Jeep. That's exactly right. Yes.
So people probably relate to it in terms of a TENS unit. People have done physical therapy, and the thought being that by re-navigating some of the neural pathways and actually forging more correct neural pathways, that the generalization of the neurons not firing from pain-induced stuff, but conducting electrically and chemically, conducting things differently, so the neurotransmitters, So
they're firing the way that they should be again.
Right, and the good juices are coming out. Yeah.
Yeah, she said compare it to a TENS unit for anybody who didn't hear the beginning of that. So thank you for that. So yeah, it's worth looking into, And they only do it once, just so you know. It's a 9-day thing. It's not like you have to keep going back and doing it. Although our therapist did say that some people do come back for like a 3 or 4 day one at some point later on. So every day this week, I'm bringing my dog to therapy. Sounded a little strange. Okay, then we do have that nicely dovetailed into our next one, pain and illness. Obviously, if a dog is in pain, a dog is not going to want to be touched in a certain spot, like their back end very often, right, the hips. And you may say, oh yeah, the dog is afraid of being touched here. Well, the dog may very well be in pain, and it's not only older dogs. There's medical conditions that can cause a hypersensitivity to touch, things like hypothyroid, not hyper, but hypo. Okay, dog who's hypothyroid, very often they're sensitive to touch. So these are things that it's good to always look for a medical cause rather than just saying, oh, the dog's just fearful, especially if it's sudden, right? Just like if we have sudden aggression, we look to see, is there actually a medical cause, right? Yes.
I moderate a group called Canine Addison's disease, and many of them have multiple endocrine problems. And the second thing we see most frequently is hypothyroidism. Mm-hmm. And very many times, the only time the owner has a clue that the dog needs to be checked at is aggressiveness, and it's associated with hypothyroidism.
Because they're sensitive about being touched.
Probably.
Yeah. And we know also thyroid imbalance anyway can cause aggression issues, right? So very important to get the thyroid checked. And a lot of times, you'll say, yeah, you should get the dog checked out by a vet. And they go to the vet, and the vet just doesn't know. The vet just goes, oh, yeah, the dog seems fine. Temperatures, the vital signs are normal. I mean, you actually have to say to the vet, could you please do a thyroid test, right?
Routine blood work.
Routine blood work, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, my dog, Mojo's 13. He gets his blood checked every 6 months. No, and thyroid, good point. Thyroid is not, yes, thyroid is not part of the routine blood work. Perhaps it should be. But no, you do specifically have to ask. That's the point that I was making as well. Obviously, this is an easier thing to fix if there is a medical cause. Then you get them on thyroid medication or whatever it is, and the issue goes away. It is important to know that obviously fear can turn to fear-based aggression, and especially if a dog has things like handling issues. Also loss of hearing. If a dog doesn't hear something coming, or loss of sight, if the dog is suddenly startled, he may lash out at something, okay? And again, that's more in the fear-based aggression. What kind of fear of all of these do you think would be actually the easiest to fix with behavior mod? Abuse? Anybody else? Pain, illness? So we have a few different guesses here. I would say, yeah, abuse can be because it was an identifiable event that made the dog afraid, okay? Traumatic experience, it's going to be a little harder to get over because it was a trauma, but, and learned or associative, I would actually say learned or associative is one of the easiest ones because if something can be learned, it can be unlearned, okay? So I would say the hardest one, anybody? You're so good. Genetics, yeah, absolutely. Again, you can make progress within what's possible, but you're not going to take the dog and totally turn them around. One other thing I wanted to mention before we move on, fear periods. This is really a hotly debated subject. There are behaviorists who will tell you that there is no such thing as a fear period. There are others who believe, yes, there absolutely are, and they're at this age, and this age. Others will say, no, they're at this age, and this age. Okay, you can do so much reading and studying that you're like, I just don't know anymore. Here's what I say. It's possible that there are fear periods. None of us know for sure. However, what is a fear period? That's the time during which you don't want to necessarily expose the dog to something that might scare him, because the opposite of that window of socialization, this is when it's going to scare the dog most, right? So some people put the fear periods, the first one roughly at 8 to 10 weeks, which if you think about that coinciding with being in the belly of a plane, for example, not a good thing, right? Traumatic experience. The second one at 17 to 21 weeks. And again, you will see different ideas of this from different behaviorists. And some believe there are third and fourth periods as well. You know, the people who believe that there are not actual fear periods, they do make a good argument that those periods actually coincide with physical changes in the dog, physiological development. Okay? And any kind of physiological change in the body is a stress, right? Even though it's just growth and it's natural and normal. So a lot of times, if it's one of those periods, it can seem that the dog is more fearful. Just something to think about. We have a question? I'm sorry, yes.
I was just wondering if you could address the breeds, or they're genetically predisposed for fear, and the over-socialization, I guess it would be a good word for that.
Yeah, you were asking earlier, I know you were
Yeah.
saying, and actually somebody else asked as well, and I'm sorry I neglected to answer that, about if you have a dog who is genetically predisposed to fear. Somebody had an Akita that they mentioned. You know, we talked earlier about getting dogs out, socializing them at an early age, and that window of socialization, right, between 4 and 12 weeks, where you can, you know, they're pretty much bomb-proof. What I meant there was a dog who has a stable temperament to begin with, okay? I did not mean that you should take a fearful dog everywhere between 4 and 12 weeks and expose them to a ton of stuff. I mean, you do have to be careful, you know, and that may be the way you find out the dog is fearful, is by trying to do your regular socialization, right? But if you have a dog who is fearful, I would say you do have to be careful. It's not the same thing. You know, you're not going to just say, I'm just going to expose him to, you know, let's take him to my kid's ball game, you know, and here's a bunch of kids running around, and here's a bunch of dogs, and it's like an overwhelming experience. I don't think, though, that you should go the other way either, and just not take the dog anywhere, which is unfortunately what happens a lot of the time. People say, yeah, my dog seems so scared on a walk, or, you know, he's pulling away, or he's pulling towards, and so we just stopped walking. It's too much of a hassle. And then the dog gets further desocialized. So I would say with the fearful dog, yeah, do take him out, and you may find that he habituates to things, right? But take him out in a way that is going to expose him to those things gradually. Okay? And we're going to talk about that during the desensitization and counter-conditioning. Okay? Let's talk about this end of the leash, human body language. You know that with fearful dogs, what you do has a huge effect, right, on the way that they respond. Sideways versus frontal presentation, you know that you're facing a dog head on, the dog facing you, is more confrontational than you're turning your body to the side. I often ask my clients, if you walked out on your porch and there was a grizzly bear, would you rather he be facing you, or would you rather he be like this? Okay, and they totally get that. Not only is the facing more confrontational, but leaning over is absolutely not a good idea. That's why, you know, so many kids get nipped, right? They come over the dog, they're patting this way, they're leaning over. I will tell you that in all the years that I did work with the LA City shelters, the only time I ever got bit, and it was my own stupidity, was there were these two little white foo-foo, I don't know what they were, breeds, in the pen, cute as anything. I was trying to get one of them adopted out, so I had him out, and I showed him to the person, and they wanted me to put him back in the pen. And when I went to put him back in the pen, little white foo-foo, I just wasn't thinking. I wasn't really on guard. And I just went and I put him down. And when I put him down, I leaned over the other dog, who jumped up and bit me in the face. It wasn't much of a bite, but I mean, still, you know, it was my own stupidity. I leaned over. Working with the wolves, I would never just sort of approach a wolf this way. Okay, I would always turn. Crouching can be helpful with some dogs. There's not, we can say this works, this works, this works. There's always going to be that one dog who didn't read the book. It's true. And for a lot of dogs and a lot of wolves, I can tell you that my being, if you were the wolf facing this way, my being this way, and just, I'm not looking at them, I'm not doing anything, that would be the easiest way to get them to come. And with stray dogs as well, if you're trying to help them out, get them in your car or whatever, just kind of doing this and they'll come up and sniff is much better than doing this, right? This is a lot more confrontational. Staring, okay? Staring is a threat in the animal kingdom. And if you've ever lived in New York, it's the same thing on the subway. You look at somebody 1 second too long and you go, what are you looking at? Okay? So staring, it's just, we're animals, right? Reaching and overhead petting, again, not only that just don't come down over the head, like the woman in the video, right? Not only don't do that, teaching kids not to do that obviously is key as well, but it's not so much only the coming down over the head as the reaching also. People that have, especially with little dogs, and they say, my dog won't come when I call him, and I say, let me see you call him. And the dog will come and he'll stop like 2 feet out, which happens to be just out of arm's reach. Why do they do that? Because they know that when that person calls them and they come, they're going to swoop down on them and they're going to pick them up, right? So this brings us to the stoop, don't swoop, okay? If you have a small dog and you're constantly doing this to pick them up and that dog doesn't like the swooping down, there's things you can do. One thing is you can get down here and, hey, how's it going? Oh, that's very nice, and then just kind of gently pick them up. You can also get the dog up on like a little cushion. If it's okay for the dog to be up on a couch or an ottoman or something, kind of, hey, up here, okay, and then pick the dog up, right? Otherwise, the dog's never coming when you call him. The dog has learned that means run away. Okay? So pet appropriately, and be careful about restraint also. I cannot tell you how many owners I have seen that say, oh, my dog loves it when my daughter hugs him. Well, it's possible. I mean, there are dogs who do enjoy being hugged, and there are dogs who have learned to tolerate being hugged. There are a lot more dogs that I've seen that do not really understand what a hug means. Okay? If anybody, you know from Patricia McConnell's work, right? I mean, we're primates. We have that ventral contact, and we hug, and we like it, and we know that it means affection. Dogs, there is no hugging in dogdom. Okay? That means something entirely different if one dog is hugging the other one over their back. So, and it's not, I'm just feeling warm and fuzzy. So we don't want to be hugging dogs. Very often with those owners, I will actually talk about the calming signals, the lip licking, the yawning, the turning away of the head, and then I'll say, now I'd like your daughter to go and hug the dog, and I want you to watch what he does, because I know he's going to do that. Okay? So be very careful about restraint. Obviously, that's why a lot of vet techs get bitten also, unfortunately. It's part of the job. You restrain the dogs and, once in a while, you get nailed. The Firm Foundation program is something that I recommend to all owners of fearful dogs. And this is sort of what can we do at home, and this is not behavior mod, okay? This is what can we do at home to lay a groundwork to make the behavior modification as successful as it possibly can be. Number one, management. If there is something that dog is afraid of, not that we're not going to do behavior mod and expose him gradually and all that good stuff, but I don't want him getting scared by that thing repetitively at home. Remember when we talked about the chemicals flooding the system and all of that, right? If that dog is in a constant state of arousal and a constant state of fear, it's not going to serve the dog or the person trying to do the behavior modification. So if there's something, I don't know, your cell phone scares the dog. Soko would have been scared of my cell phone ring, right? Put it on vibrate. Wear it on you. Do something, if it's the hair blower, go in the room and close the door. If it's the vacuum cleaner, have somebody walk the dog while you're vacuuming. I mean, just until you get the dog over it. So if you're going to start a behavior modification program to work on a specific fear, I would suggest that you make sure that the dog is not exposed to the trigger, the thing that scares him, for 2 weeks if possible, beforehand. Okay? I know it's not always easy to do, and this is real life, but also if you repeatedly expose the dog to the thing over and over, there's a chance that the dog is going to sensitize to it meaning that the dog is going to actually become more fearful of it. It's the opposite of habituation, right? Where the dog would, with repeated exposures, become, it's okay, yeah, I'm not worried anymore. You can sensitize the dog to things. So that's also definitely a possibility. Dogs who are afraid of something outside the window, like people walking by or other dogs, and they freak out, do something to stop that lookout post from going on. Have curtains over that window. Have, a gate across so he can't get in that room, whatever you need to do. Okay, let's talk a little bit about nutrition. Nutrition affects behavior in people, in dogs. I'm a whole other person if I've had 5 cups of coffee. We know that kids are whole different people if they've eaten a ton of sugar. And it doesn't do much to balance your system. With fearful dogs, what I have found over the years is that changing their diet from a diet that is poor, and I will explain what I mean by that, to something that is a lot better for them, you will get much, much better results with any kind of behavior mod. And once in a while, it actually just fixes the problem, which is really interesting. So first we have grades of meat. We know that dogs are primarily carnivores. We would like to see the first 2 ingredients in a dog food have something to do with meat. And you guys know that foods, they have to be listed in the order of what there's the most of first by bulk weight, right? Just like in people food, it's the law. So if we have a chicken-based food, chicken would be a whole meat source. That's the highest grade, just the word chicken, lamb, beef, whatever it is. The next one down would be meal, chicken meal, okay, beef meal. And the last one would be byproducts. Byproducts in a chicken would be things like the head, the feet, the intestines, the undeveloped eggs, things that make your clients go, ew, when you tell them. Because really they shouldn't be in a dog's food. They don't really have a reason to be there. So I don't want to see byproducts, and I don't want to see them high up on the list at the very least. And also, just so you know, one sneaky thing the manufacturers do is they will take an ingredient and they will actually break it down into different parts. They tend to do this a lot with corn. It'll say the meal and the hulls, the sorghum, and this and that. And because they do that, they can list them separately. But if they combine them by bulk weight, they would actually have to be the first thing listed. And they know that people read those labels. So just something to look for. Also, if it is saying a meal, it should say specifically, and this is the same thing with fats, it should say specifically what animal that's coming from. I want to see chicken meal, not something like poultry meal, poultry fat. What does that mean? Okay. If you are interested in learning more about that type of thing, by the way, I think a very good resource is the Whole Dog Journal. How many of you get that? Okay, so a lot of you. Okay, good. I love this audience. I speak in places where they go, the whole what? Yeah. Whole Dog Journal, their website is whole, W-H-O-L-E, -dog-journal.com. And they actually have a thing where you can download the back issues, or even just articles, actually. So you can get some great stuff. And they tend to rate the dog foods once a year as well. They do a really, really good job. Let's talk about corn. Corn is a filler. Corn is something that you will find listed high up on the list on a lot of supermarket brands of dog foods, for example. Corn is responsible for a lot of dry, itchy skin, for one thing. It's a really common allergen, which, it just baffles me how many of my clients have taken their dog to the vet and the vet says, yeah, the dog probably just has allergies or, something, has hot spots. Never, ever, ever asks them about the food the dog is on. Okay? It's a very common thing. So not only do we want the corn out of there because of the allergens, but also corn, through a series of chemical reactions in the body, actually lowers the serotonin levels in the brain. And serotonin is that neurochemical that makes us feel nice and calm, right? That's why we have SSRIs, which are selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. These are, in people also, right? These are the antidepressant medications because they raise your serotonin levels. So does exercise, which we'll be talking about as well. Do you guys want to, I'm going to leave this up to you. Do you want to hear exactly how the corn affects the serotonin? Okay. Because it involves my drawing. And I have to warn you about my drawing. You'll see why I never draw at my seminars in just a second. Okay. Allow me. You'll be so sorry you had me draw. Alta, is this good for you? Oh, okay. Hang on one second. And while she's doing that, I'm gonna explain. The production of serotonin in the brain is dependent on nutritionally derived, that's great, high tech. It's all good. It's dependent on nutritionally derived tryptophan. Okay, we all know tryptophan from Thanksgiving dinner when everybody's like, "Ugh," afterwards, right? I'm going to actually draw as I explain this. How would that be? Okay. This is your brain. This is your brain on tryptophan. Okay. So here we have the brain. Okay. We also have some muscle tissue over here. Muscle, I can spell. Muscle tissue. Okay. Now we have little molecules. Okay. You know tryptophan is an amino acid, right? And okay, here's your little tryptophan, because that's exactly what they look like, in case you want to know. Okay. Can you guys all see this okay? Move it up. Jeez, you want a lot. Okay. Da, 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 da. Okay. Okay. I can do this. Can everybody see that? Yes? Okay. Okay. So we know that we need the nutritionally derived tryptophan, and the tryptophan has to actually cross through. Do I have another? Oh, this is good. I have color. Okay. This is the blood-brain barrier. Okay, this is what they have to get through. This is like illegal immigrants trying to get into the country. They have to get over that to get into the brain. That's where they're all needing to go. So, okay, we've got the tryptophan. We also have other amino acids that are trying to get up to the brain at the same time, right? Now, diets that are high in protein tend to deplete the tryptophan levels. Okay? Diets that are actually high in carbohydrates increase the available nutritional tryptophan. And I will explain about that in a minute. If you have a high-carb, low-protein diet, which I would say is like 1 part protein to 5 to 6 parts carbs, at least, you're going to stimulate the secretion of insulin. And what happens here, okay, you know, I have this all drawn out here so I can watch this. I will explain what this is in just a moment. These little things say NA on them, just in case you can't see that, okay? And I will explain what that is. Excuse my back for a second. Okay, what the insulin is doing in the system is actually diverting some of these other, this is actually noradrenaline. This is actually the insulin that is created by that 1 to 5 to 6 mix, right, is actually going to take these other ones that would be trying to get up past the blood-brain barrier, and it's actually diverting them into the muscle tissue. However, because tryptophan has this particularly fabulous shape to its molecule, it does not get diverted into the muscle tissue. And so there's less competition, and the tryptophan actually does cross the blood-brain barrier, okay, and it ends up in there. They did a study in rats that found that a diet that exceeded 18% protein, and this was by Spring, if anybody wants to look this up, in 1986, was sufficient to block the tryptophan effect. In 1996, Nicholas Dodman, do you guys all know who he is? Okay, Nicholas Dodman and others did a study that showed that dogs who exhibited territorial aggression, that actually had a large fear-based component to it, they responded beneficially to a reduced protein diet. I think a lot of the times we've kind of heard that about, yeah, maybe you should feed a lower protein if there's aggression, but we don't really know why. Okay, this is why. In fact, the James O'Hare, do you guys know who he is? Okay, James O'Hare, for those who don't know, he is the head of Cynology College online, which is like a distance learning course. It's cynologycollege.com. And in fact, I'm going to be teaching a course on fear issues for them, which is going to be like an elective. But anyway, he suggests feeding a meal of pure carbohydrates within 2 hours of like a reduced kibble diet. And the carbohydrates can be things like sweet potatoes. It can be rice, carrots, peas. And that's, again, to get that 1 to 5 to 6 ratio. He also suggests including a B vitamin, or specifically a B6 vitamin at 1 milligram per kilogram of body weight per day, because B6 is actually a cofactor for tryptophan synthesis into serotonin. Okay? Again, all of this is not going to hurt a dog, and it certainly might help. There's no reason not to. Also, a lot of people who have switched to the BARF diet, or, for those of you who are going, what the heck is BARF? Biologically appropriate raw food, or bones in raw food, one or the other, but it's a raw diet, have seen real huge changes, not only physically, but in their dog's behavior as well. So it makes a huge difference. There was a study in 1975 by Lytle, which is spelled Lytle, for anybody who wants to look it up, and his colleagues. They were studying pain thresholds in rats. And what they found was that a diet that was restricted to corn as the primary protein source resulted in a significant reduction of plasma and brain levels of tryptophan, okay, with a subsequent decrease in the production of brain serotonin. And serotonin also has an analgesic effect on pain. So if you think about it, if you have a dog who's getting a high corn diet and who is touch sensitive, for example, one might be really having an effect on the other. It's worth thinking about it, and it's worth having the client or whoever switch the diet if they will. It's interesting, too, that with so animals who are fed a high corn diet exhibit a lower threshold for pain. And then the subjects in the rat study who were then given an injection of tryptophan or switched to a high tryptophan diet soon recovered from the effects. So it really does prove what an effect it had on them. I'm going to move this back. Corn is unusually low in tryptophan. It's important to know. Corn is also very high in an amino acid called tyrosine. That's Tyrosine. And in fact, James O'Hare calls tyrosine the anti-tryptophan. So I should have drawn that as well, but sorry. There was a question back there.
Or rice, and I don't know exactly what all.
You know what? I am not a nutrition expert. Does anybody know the answer to that?
No, not in potatoes or rice.
And there you have it. Okay. She said not in potatoes or rice, but I'm sorry, I don't know that. But okay. Ask me a dog question. Yes. The question was, how do I feel about fish oil as a supplement? I think it's a great supplement. I've actually used it with my own dogs for years. I take fish oil capsules as a supplement myself. I don't... You know what? I actually used to use a product with my dogs called Grizzly Salmon Oil. Has anybody seen that? It comes in like a pumped thing. I am not sure off the top of my head what exactly is in it, whether it's the omega... It's omega-3s. Omega-3 and 6? Yeah, I believe it's omega-3 and omega-6 on that one. Yeah, I like the prepackaged stuff that's already, sort of balanced out, and I like the Grizzly Salmon Oil, I have to tell you. It's easy, it goes right on top of the food, it doesn't have a yucky taste, at least not to my dogs. Yes.
Trader Joe's has salmon oil available, and they have to repack those things, so most of the one gel cap.
Okay, so she's saying that Trader Joe's has the salmon oil capsules available, and for most dogs it would be one gel cap. Depending on the size of the dog, though, obviously. I mean, yeah. Okay. So, yeah, you guys have Trader Joe's up here, too, huh? Okay, cool. We love Trader Joe's. Okay. There is a really good food a really good book called Dr. Pitcairn's Complete Guide. And that is, what is the whole name? To Dr. Pitcairn's Natural Health in Dogs and Cats, exactly. And that's been around forever. It came out in a second edition. There's really good nutritional information there. Regarding the BARF diet, the original books were Ian Billinghurst, and since then there's been quite a few other people who have kind of simplified it. He was one of these scientific types, and it was, because I had his first book, and I was trying to follow it, and it's a lot of work. But you can make it simpler than that. Foods Dogs Die For is actually by Ann Martin, is a really good book about the what really goes into dog foods and what you're really putting into your dogs. That'll open your eyes. And James O'Hare has the book Canine Neuropsychology, where he actually discusses the tyrosine and the corn and the tryptophan and the whole thing, if you're interested in looking into that more. Let's move on to physical exercise. We all know physical exercise. People with depression, they say, you should exercise a couple times a week. it's the same thing. Dogs with fear issues, they really need to have a balanced system. And I can tell you that people are less reactive, obviously, when they're calm, right? If I'm in traffic and somebody cuts me off, because, I live in Los Angeles, where they do that all the time, there's a real difference in the way I react to them. If I've just, say, come from the gym for a nice workout or come from having a massage, which never happens, but it sounds good, and I'm really nice and calm, versus if I was really tense that day to begin with, right? Physical exercise, again, there's different types of physical exercise. We have the fast aerobic ball throwing, wow, crazy running around with other dogs. And then we have the kind of more slow, long-term endurance stuff like hiking, like taking nice long walks. The nice long walks, all of that does tend to raise the serotonin levels in the brain. I think that if people with fearful dogs would do nothing more than take those dogs out for a really nice long walk every day, those dogs would just be so much better across the board, and especially in conjunction with getting them on a better food. Okay, you have like such a better starting place for behavior modification. The the exercise does enhance serotonin metabolism in the brain, including the cerebral cortex. Day and Associates did a study in 1992. Again, those poor rats. They found that daily exercise actually generated pronounced and sustained enhancement of serotonin metabolisms, and including the cerebral cortex. And the cerebral cortex is the most likely neural site that is actually mediating the beneficial effects of exercise over depression. So very important. And also, it's just an ability to cope with stressful situations. And it's the same thing with people. People who work out regularly, if you miss your workout for a couple of weeks, you just feel edgy, right? You feel off balance. Now, it's easy to say, okay, yeah, give the dog some exercise. Not everybody has all the time, right? Not everybody can hike their dog for 4 hours a day. It sounds good. You can do daily walks. I'm all for daily walks. Jogs are fine, but again, not like where the dog's doing sprints, okay? Just we're talking about slow. There's bicycle, what is it called? The canine cruiser, the thing that you can attach to the bicycle. There's also a springer, So there's different ways to do that, taking the dog on hikes. The backyard fetch, again, other games where the dog is really running, I would say maybe like 1 to 2 times a week rather than like every single day.